Welcome back to It Tastes Like Burning, a fantastic podcast by two volunteer fire chiefs that give nonsensical advice, absolutely terrible recommendations, and the most incomprehensible set of plans that anyone's ever conceived to try and present and follow. So good luck, Godspeed, and hold on. Well, welcome back to It Tastes Like Burning. I'm Matt.
I'm Jesse.
Today, you're going to have a special insight to the complete chaos and randomness. Quite frankly, we're both pretty tired. We've had a pretty healthy week of calls, wide variety of calls, and we have 500 different topics that we're going to talk about. But I think today we're going to try something just truly off the cuff, and it's going to be an absolute non-thought-out, pre-planned, complete random slice of just chaos, and we're going to see what happens with.
And if you're hearing this, it was okay. If you never hear this, you'll never know.
Yeah, you can take that to Congress and testify on that.
Yeah.
So this past, just really for us, we're coming into our spring fire season. In a, let me think, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 5 days, we've ran 49 calls. By no means are all of those wildland. We had some colossal wildland calls that we went to, but they're actually a very small total function of our 49 call volume shot. And still had car accidents, still had a handful of medicals, structure fires, alarms, more alarms, third alarms, fifth alarms. It's lots of alarms for us. I guess one thing we'll just bounce off into today is when you have those major calls, large mutual aid calls, or even if the major events specifically in your area, one of the crushing burdens that you get to deal with is going to be still trying to be able to figure out how to protect your area outside of that one major event.
Yeah, because you typically empty your house, and people want to go to that big call because that's the awesome big new thing, and somebody's got to take care of home, and that's the boring job that nobody wants.
Yeah, it's one of the non-fun things. We're going to segue off, but still be on the same thing. For anyone that's new listening to this, when you're given an assignment on scene, it's not up for debate. You just need to nod your head, ask any questions, ask clarification, and then go do what you were asked. Because, quite frankly, there's so many variables, and everyone has questions, and everyone has concerns, and everyone particularly has an opinion. And at the end of the day, it's so difficult from a command point of view on the dealing with the volunteer side. People walking up and saying, well, I wouldn't do it that way. That's good. When I come to your area, I'll do it your way. Right now, you need to do what I'm telling you. Yeah. And it's really not up for debate. Again, I'm not talking about objections to safety concerns. That's not what I'm talking about. Whether you prefer to do a positive pressure attack or whether you prefer to vertical ventilate, if it's not your area and you're not command, don't care. We just need to do the assignment that's been instructed.
Yeah, and hopefully you get an assignment. That gets tough sometimes too, because it's tough. We ran into a lot of issues this last week and saw some things that a lot of it had nothing to do with our department, our area, but just the complexities of big complex scenes, and sometimes those guys struggled to even get an assignment out of where they were going and where they were supposed to be, or they got to where they were told to go and there was nothing there to do. And some of that stuff's a challenge just in amongst itself.
Another thing I'm going to pile onto this. So again, it doesn't really matter what the size of the scene is. Could be a small scene, with a really complex problem. Could be a very large scene with a ultimate simple goal, but there's a lot of complex processes to be able to accomplish the given task. And one thing that just really chaps me is when people have a particular gripe about command after the scene, and they'll go in and I mean just baby seal club them, armchair quarterback them to death. Okay, if you realize that was a problem, why in the hell didn't you offer a tentative solution? Because it doesn't benefit a damn person to sit there and say, oh, we should have done it this way. This is how he should have done it. This is how she should have actually dispatched or coordinated. Give me a break. Give me an absolute break. That's one of the most infuriating things on my end is when people have gripes about command and you never heard a peep out of them on scene. And if you're dealing with, like, I was talking about earlier, very large wildland fires, if you expect one dude in a pickup truck to handle a 100,000 acre fire and coordinate 15,000 people, you're an idiot.
Yeah, not happening.
Okay, that's impossible. Okay, there's a reason that in the military there's generals and there's even different types of generals, and then you get to colonels and there's even different types of colonels. And then you got lieutenants and captains and on and on and on and on. And there's the exact same reason a lot of that paramilitary thought process and chain of command structure does occur in the fire service, because on an exceedingly complex scene, ultimately someone gets to be responsible for it, and ultimately there's a whole bunch of people that carry out that thought process.
Yeah, and one of the great things that we have is there's this thing called NIMS that we all had to take all these classes. And if we paid attention just a little bit and we got the gist of what they were trying to tell us, maybe not the minute details, but the gist of what they were trying to teach you, it's completely applicable to complex scenes, non-complex scenes. And if you take, I'm not telling you that every piece of every part of that is what you use every time. There's bits and pieces, and the fact that you can scale it, but the system works. If you buy into the fact that the system works and you control those span of controls and look at things from divisions and whatever the situation dictates, that it truly works. But you've got to believe in it just enough to get it started and going.
Right. Yeah. Another thing I'm going to add to this is I truly believe that leaders should lead from the front, but I personally believe too many people take that as like a literal instruction. If you have a large scene, the chief should not be on a hose line.
No.
He really, yeah,
or in a vehicle.
He really does. That's your job. Your job is to lead, guide, and command these people. Okay, your job is not to be on the fire scene. Your job is not to be on a hose. Your job is not to be driving the apparatus if it's wildland. Now, I get it. If you're first on scene, well, okay, fine. Okay, you're an hour into this. 500 people are on scene. It's a 10,000 acre fire, and you still don't have a formalized command. No, that you're going to get in trouble, big trouble.
Yeah, and I came from a little different world, and we did things different. But I'm not saying it's right or anything like that. It's just different. But I came from a world where there was a specific person or persons that were going to just do that job of command and not going to engage in firefighting. In fact, you might have a helmet. You might wear a helmet so somebody could identify you, but you wouldn't put on the gear on purpose so that you wouldn't engage in firefighting. And it's just a difference in the way that we did things. But it kept you outside of where your picture was bigger. And you've got to have that bigger picture. That commander's got to be looking farther than the 20 feet to where the fire is. They've got to be looking at the big picture.
Yeah, and I mean, again, there's so many different scenarios where this is applicable. You could have a really small scene. We'll just pretend that it's a confined space. Okay, but that's an exceedingly challenging scene. And hell, we'll make it not only below grade, but there's two right turns in there also, blind. Um, it's an exceedingly small space, but the complexity of that problem is colossal. Uh, and the last thing you need is your chief in a miner's helmet dropping down in there and just getting a look for himself, just to make sure. Yeah, it's confined space. Well, everyone told you that. And I realize I'm being pedantic here, um, but I see a lot of problems on scenes when departments don't focus on just establishing command early, because there is. I mean, we have assignments for our crews on a rescue scene of a traffic accident. Well, there's crap they got to do before they ever truly start extricating, even if they're basic steps. Same thing on a structure fire. You've got a basic series of events: size up, walk around, tool placement, stretching lines. You had to do all of that before you could do the theoretical interior attack or, God forbid, a rescue. The chiefs in command have the same checklist. There is a series of things that you have to do beforehand, because if you don't, you will get ultimately crushed.
Yeah, and you get into complex deals, and it's not just that first wave, because 90% of the stuff we do, one truck, two guys, four guys, whatever it is, handles 90% of the calls, and they're simple, and they're, from the cat in the tree to the dumpster fire that takes no real thought process or anything to get that goal accomplished. But you get beyond that to where you're getting that second or third wave of people coming in. There's got to be a mechanism there to, one, bring those people up to speed of what's happening and what they need to be doing, and all that falls to command. And that adage that every job you don't delegate, you better be ready to do. You better learn quickly how to delegate stuff, because you can consume yourself trying to run around like a chicken with your head cut off to do all these things that you could have just said, hey, you fiber ventilation, and that's the end of it. Once you've done that, you should reasonably expect that whatever task you sent them to do is done. Or if it's not going to get done, they're going to tell you, hey, we can't make that happen because of power lines or whatever the issue is. Beyond that, you just automatically, in your mind, that's done. And there's no need to circle back. There's no need to double check. Like, you should have that, benefit of knowing that you gave that order or that command, and it got followed and it got done. It may not be the way you would have done it. It may not be the most orthodox means of getting this task done, but as long as it gets done in the end, does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, that's particularly for anyone, new chief, new officer. That'd be one of the bigger things I'd tell anyone is it's never going to happen as fast as you want it. It's never going to be done exactly the way you want it done, even if you actually truly analyze how they did it. Yep, that's exactly how I trained them. That's actually how they interpreted the information, and that's how they processed it, and that's how they performed. So that's really how I wanted it done. It really boils down to a time factor. You just need to acquiesce and accept that it is what it is. Nothing happens at the speed of light. And you got to give your crews time to complete the task, and then ultimately also you got to acknowledge it too. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of critique here and there, But if they got the job done, they need to know they got the job done too.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, you did this, but did you think about maybe trying this? Or, it's not that baby seal bat that Matt talks about all the time that you beat them to death with. And that goes so much farther beyond just the crews that are doing the task, but leave the baby seal bat out of it for the incident commander, because you don't have any idea what 97 things are on his plate that he either hasn't delegated or hasn't been able to delegate up until that point. There's some serious challenges that happen in incidents that are beyond the dumpster fire.
Sure. Yeah. Don't ever hesitate to approach command with a problem and a solution. Say, hey, we're over here on the Alpha side. We noticed that X, Y, and Z hasn't been done. I've got crews. We've got tools. We're ready to go take care of it. Just waiting on your instruction. Yeah. 99% of the time he's going to be like, oh, go.
Yeah, do that.
Go do that. Because you've just made his life, her life 1,000 times easier by just acknowledging the problem and taking care of it.
Yeah. And sometimes it's more or less just hey, there's the meter's still in the socket over here on the Bravo side of the house. We're going to pull it. And that's the end of the discussion. There's no further discussion needed on that other than the acknowledgement that that's what you're doing.
Yeah, it's and one thing I do want to, well, I guess we'll segue off into this. I'm not a firm believer in trying to prepare for everything. I'm a firm believer in being really good at the skills that you're going to use on scene. If you're truly practiced and truly up to date on your skills and knowledge of your skills and situational awareness of where those skills are applicable, that's going to carry you into the unknown really well, because you're still going to be able to perform all those normal functions at a muscle memory level, but they'll be able to actually have some brain space left open to do some critical thinking and scene analysis and give you some actual feedback instead of, why can't we ever get the hose to deploy off the truck?
Your value, and I've said this before, your value as an employee or anything is in your ability to solve problems. You're there to solve problems. We're called, dispatched to calls to solve problems. So your value is completely derived from your ability to solve problems. You solve little problems, you have little value. You solve big problems, you have big value. And the guy that can solve the problems of, oh, my boots are on the wrong feet, that's a problem. He solved it. Great. But he has very little value. The guy that says, we need a napalm drop on this other building to keep the fire from getting to the third building, that guy just solved a crazy problem. I don't know where he got the napalm.
Yeah.
But kudos to him.
And it's the ability to do critical thinking while command, but like I said, particularly in your feedback back to command, your ability to offer solutions can be invaluable. Well, I'm trying to think when this was. I think it was 5-6 years ago. We had a colossal structure fire for a 76,000 square foot industry building. Huge fuel loads, non-sprinkled. Had a hydrant, but definitely not enough for the BTUs that were being generated with the facility. All said and done, it was a 6-county response, 14 agencies, and around 275 people. Our organization, though big and though awesome, is not that big or awesome. And when you encounter a scene like that, you will have things that are so far out of the realm of trying to micromanage that you will be crushed to death by trying to manage that. And your ability to set up not only a sector commander, you may have 2 sector commanders per sector, because there's so many people on scene that even your sector commanders, how does one person manage 75 people like that? They can't.
No, 5 to 7.
So, yeah, I mean, your hierarchy is going to get exponentially bigger with the amount of people that are on scene. And for all of our rural departments out there, don't tell me you don't go to big scenes. You go to big scenes. If you go to wildland fires, you have the potential to go into gigantic scenes with local agencies, state agencies, federal agencies. It is Hurricane Katrina. It's just not spread across the city of New Orleans. It's across half your state.
You get into that stuff, and I've seen it go good. I've seen it go bad. I've been there for when firefighters ride the helicopter to the hospital out of those wildland fires, and of course that's a whole nother level of complication to your scene. Thank goodness I wasn't in command of that, but it's a whole nother level. When do you stop? When do you pull the resources back? Those decisions are tough decisions, and they're complicated, and it's not as cut and dry as putting the wet stuff on the red stuff. Sometimes you wait, sometimes you direct attack, all that stuff. That there's tons of decisions that are made there that they're real easy to look back on and decide whether it was right or wrong. But at the time, that you do the best you can with what you got. And just the growth of an incident to that level where it's 100 firefighters or 100 trucks or any of that stuff, your span of control is so important. That dividing things up into boxes of operation, or whether it's geographical or whether it's based on units and tasks, or however you decide to divide that up.
Could be as simple as they just have different operating radios.
Yeah.
Don't make that colossal mistake of putting, the lone unit that's on some wonky radio frequency. We'll just say they're on 400, and you put them with nothing but a group of guys that are working the head of the fire, and they're on VHF. I mean, I've seen that before in the past, and that's that in itself can be a colossal disaster. Now, I'll still say there's a generic safety net, and if they're all working together, there's a solid safety net there. But there's no redundancy in the safety if you have a failure of communications.
Yeah, no, because communication's key, and that communications is not just the actual. It's not just the equipment and the ability of the equipment to get the information from A to B. It's the information itself, and it's that firefighter's ability to describe what they're seeing, smelling, hearing, all those things that are going on in an effective way that the commander can understand what the true situation is. And it's also the commander's ability or their designee to communicate back information that's understandable, and they can act upon it appropriately, because the failure of the firefighter in the field, or the division chief, or whatever it's called at that moment, to let you know that you've got dark, acrid, high pressure smoke leaving from the second story Charlie side window, that means a lot about that scene. But if they're just ignoring it or not communicating that and just say, we've got some bad smoke right here right now, well, what does it mean?
Yeah, interior crew needs to work faster. Yeah, and I've heard that on the radio before. It's getting bad. You guys need to go faster. Yeah. And that's all that's communicated. Kind of another backside of this, and this is more of just my perspective, particularly from that 4 or 5 day call span I was talking about earlier. There was multiple large fires we were responding to, but the closest one was also our local county fire. And I had full intent of heading out there at the beginning, but there was some equipment and personnel that I kind of needed to get lined up. So I hung back. And I was already holding a crew back for our town. just for our obligations to our city. And that call in the span of an hour and a half, it had exponentially increased in size and complexity, and there was a colossal wave of resources flowing into this local fire. The kicker is that my particular location is we're the county seat. We also have the most people, the most apparatus, and I'm a huge believer in mutual aid. In the rare times that I need mutual aid, when I need it, I need everyone. And I look at it as my responsibility as these smaller departments that are around me, and they go do their duty, and they go help their neighbors. I have the ability and the resources to also hold people back, but also cover their areas at the same time. So while all that was going on, we had shifted to pretty much absorbing all of our county's call volume, which we could do easily, because I had, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4 trucks, true city engines, not wildland apparatus, just for protecting our town and our community around us. Started to realize a couple of things. One, the guys that are currently working out on the fire, they're going to be there all day, probably pretty decent chunk of the night. So we need to start figuring out a rotation crew, food, water. Then you have the crushing wave of donations that was coming in, and I do mean by the metric ton. Then you have cash. Then in this particular case, there was a town evacuated. So we've got to figure out evacuation locations, Red Cross, United Way. All these people evacuating have critters, cats, dogs, cows, horses. Different topic, but the cows and horses were a particular colossal pain in the ass. And there's a point there where if you're not thinking at the true command level, and you make the mistake of who's going to stay in town, not going to stay in town. Damn it, we're just going to send everyone. We would have particularly been in a sling. It would have been later that night, but there was a structure fire that day. Actually, there was multiple structure fires that day. Typical alarms, no car accidents, handful of medicals, and
additional wildland fires.
Yeah, and then at 3 o'clock in the morning, there was another colossal wildland fire just north of us. And you just, as chief and assistant chief, and if you're big enough where you have battalion chiefs, division chiefs, your job's not to go out and basically play, have fun. Your sole purpose there is to do all the truly mundane, though critical, just work back at the stations that have to be done there. And again, I'm a little bit of a bigger department comparatively speaking to most traditional volunteer departments. I'm not colossal, but I'm not tiny either. And we have multiple responsibilities that I feel like that we're obligated to protect.
Back to that, not send everybody, do your part in your mutual aid. What you have to realize is if you don't ever go and provide mutual aid, when it comes time that you need to receive mutual aid, what you're going to receive is not going to be the greatest mutual aid in the world, because they're not going to come in droves to help you if you're not going to help them, as well as you learn from those experiences of going to provide mutual aid what departments' capabilities are, what their strong suits are, and where their a better help to you for different situations, because believe it or not, you run into that department that's going to be just colossally awesome at truck company operations, and you're going to, when you need that, you know who to call.
Oh yeah, we've got a classic example of that. We got a real small volunteer department right next to us, top notch. Damn, they're good. Their chief been a exceedingly long time volunteer. He's not that old either. He's in his mid 40s. Exceedingly long time volunteer. He's a truckie in our city's major department. The guys and the whole department, just truck work particularly. That yes, they're phenomenal at that.
And but if you're not having those interactions, you don't know that. You know, they're they're an asset to everything within 40, 50 miles of them, but half of them that are in 40, 50 miles of them don't know they exist, or don't know they have that capability. So you've got to do that. That's a critical part. And whether you're political organization that sits atop of you, because we all answer to one of those for the most part, understands that or not, you have to teach them that, because it's vital for your well-being and your city, because it's just like a mass casualty incident. It's it's anything that overwhelms your capabilities, and there's the potential for that pretty much any given time. Like that incident that overwhelms your capabilities is right around the corner, and it could be as simple as a bus crash, or your downtown square, or whatever on fire. It could be one of those events that you don't get to plot it on a calendar and say, okay, next Tuesday the square's going to catch on fire.
Right.
It can happen in that super complex event, whatever it is. How you handle that is not necessarily a representation of your day-to-day calls, but that medium-sized call or that mediumly complex call, how that works out for you is going to lead you down the path of how that bigger call is going to work. And it's that practice what you preach kind of deal, where if you practice how you play. So if you don't typically use those levels of management, or those layers of tasks and divisions and all that stuff, even on the call where you probably didn't need it. But if you'll employ some of that stuff into those smaller calls where you're practicing that, it makes it easier to turn that switch on and do it when you have to do it. I have a background in a huge background in wildland. I've gone to some of the biggest wildland fires in the state of Texas, and participated as a rank and file firefighter, riding the back of a brush truck, to the point of I've been the incident commander of some pretty seriously large incidents with hundreds of fire trucks and all that stuff. And it's the complexity of managing all those pieces and putting yourself outside of worrying about the minute deals of, you know, this truck needs water at this moment. No, I'm not going to think about that one little task. That's something that I've delegated to my staging or tankers division, or water supply division, or whatever division that I put over the needs of those units. That's who's dealing with that. I'm not dealing with that. I'm dealing with, what my next 12-hour operational period is going to look like, where my resources are going to come, because I've got to cut these guys loose, because I can't work them 24 hours a day, because that's just inherently dangerous for them. Whether they want to go home or not, we got to figure out how to make them go home and at least take a shower and eat something and maybe take a 2-hour nap. That's what your focus has got to be on all those things, and how I'm going to acquire more resources. What resources do I need for the next period? What do I need immediately? What do I need 6 hours from now? What do I need 12 hours from now? What do I need tomorrow? Because that's where you've got to put your thought process into the future of the incident. we all look at it like we're going to stop at any minute, but the reality is if we stopped them all that quick, they'd never get to 200,000 acres.
Right. Yeah, my background's definitely. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've been on some big wildland fires, but I'll only ever drive in or in a truck. Uh, Done a little bit of the water op command and organizing tanker shuttles, but not actual legitimate command. My command background's more urban, industrial, commercial.
Yeah.
That's truly city firefighting.
Yeah. And it's just the difference between mostly rural environment versus, I would call this suburban environment.
I will say, if I'm dealing with a very large wildland fire, particularly in our state, I would much rather have my local volunteers in their old pickups and their old brush truck rigs, because they know the area. They have a vested interest in the area. Now, I will admit that coordinating that is literally
Herding cats.
Herding cats. That's an analogy that's used often, but when you're trying to coordinate even a moderately sized wildland fire, I will definitely take the local community's resources way, way, way before I would ever truly want state or federal resources, just because at the end of the day, those volunteers have more of, and it really comes down to a pride and ownership thing. For them, it is they are protecting their community. This is their form of service to their community. They have a much higher vested interest in the outcome. And I'm not trying to say that state or federal agencies don't care. They care, okay, but it's a completely different mindset and approach.
It's a risk reward equation. So, if it's not your land or your neighborhood or your community or your neighbor, and you're just coming here from wherever in the country, there's a disconnect there, and it's completely a thing. It's a thing, and it shows. And I would argue that sometimes it's not a bad thing, because with that risk reward, sometimes there's the tendency to take a risk that's not necessarily the right risk for the situation. I've seen that a lot too. And we get told they're better trained and this and that, but they're not. It's not that. It's just they're not willing to accept as much risk.
It's that classic debate from career and volunteer. And I think both organizations look at it from the wrong point of view. It boils down to someone's ability to be able to do something proactive on scene. And I'm not going to discount or not put any value in a volunteer's 50 years of experience in their local area, or even if it's 10 or 5. Real interesting thing happens when people actually apply hands-on.
Oh, yeah.
Quite frankly, what's more valuable on any given scene? A volunteer with 20 years of experience on a relatively busy department, or someone that's just out of a fire academy? I mean, they're not comparable. They're not even remotely comparable. And I could care less if the volunteer has any certifications or not. Because ultimately it is just experience. And that guy with 20 years of experience, that's 20 years of experience. Now, if you can compound that with 20 years of training, required training, multiplied by increase in seniority, advancement in positions, and they start becoming very skilled in other areas beyond just hose handling tactics and driver operations, and they start to take more of a scope practice to it, department operations, true actual command scene structures. Sure, not going to discount that at all. Only an idiot would. But you can't sit there and say that volunteers also don't practice that, because they do. Whether anyone wants to admit that or not, they do.
Oh yeah.
Even really small, exceedingly rural volunteer fire departments train.
Yeah.
They do practice. Now, are they training on a level of what the third largest city in the U.S. levels training is? No, it's not applicable to their area.
No, but what they are training on is the things that they deem or see that are the areas where they can improve and what needs work, and they're taking a more introspective look at some of that stuff. Whereas you get into the larger organizations and stuff, and it's just a throw it on the wall, hope it sticks kind of training mentality that everybody's going to train on all these things, and they're not looking at actually what their weaknesses or strengths are. It's just a blanket approach, and
Well, it's a corporate level of HR. It's just blanket coverage so that you have liability protection, not guaranteed as solutions rendered. I mean, if you really want to split hairs on it, that's what it's about. It's not truly what benefits that station, that district, that division. No, it's an HR policy approach.
right,
Just cover everyone with it.
yeah,
And volunteers just frankly aren't going to do it.
well,
They won't. There's certain things they'll cover. I mean, because you could arguably say we have some of the same training here in Texas.
oh yeah,
Everybody comes home. The traffic incident management class, okay? But there's also exceedingly applicable information in those. And here in Texas, we have a large state. There's a colossal mountain of volunteer fire departments in the state. I think it's around 80% total is volunteer. And there's a lot of mutual aid. I was surprised at one of the big fires we were at recently, a relatively small town that does have paid staff, but I was surprised to see them out there on their TIFMIS deployment out where we were at. I mean, it's awesome. Don't get me wrong. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's working how it's supposed to be intended. The scene got big enough that it dictated external resources come in. Well, they reached out externally, and that town was the one that responded, which is awesome.
and you also got to realize when you get into those TIFMAS resources, and for those that are not in Texas, TIFMAS is a Texas interagency mutual aid system or whatever it is, and it's basically a system to pull resources from different parts of the state to help with large incidents, mostly wildfire stuff. But
You would know more about this than me. Is that something that came from Hurricane Katrina, or is that a 9/11 type thing, or is that I know it was already in place by Hurricane Harvey.
Yeah, it happened sometime between Katrina and the wildfires of 2011, because in 11 it already existed. There was TIFMAS, and it was specifically for those larger incidents. It's geared more towards the wildland side of it, but there's medical deployments, there's all kinds of stuff. But you need to look at those resources of that TIFMAS, like they have some constraints of what they can and can't do, and there's part of that system ties their hands, and their tactics and their way that they fight fire, especially wildland, is going to be completely different what 90% of us do. But they're a tremendous resource to come in and basically clean up your mess. And I say that in the respects of mopping up and doing that overhaul stuff, because it's a slower pace. You've got the guys doing the super aggressive attack, and those TIFMAS guys are not those guys. They're not the super aggressive. Now, they'll do your burnout operations. They'll do some of that stuff for you. But but they're truly great for that back end of the incident, and it lets you put your world back together and get your stuff all fixed, because you're, from the minute the bell rings until you get back to the station, you're tearing up equipment. Right. And that gives you the break to do that. Now, do I think that, and I'll get in trouble for saying this, I truly look at them as like a second responder.
You were talking about that earlier, and I'd never really considered it that way, but I really do think that's a good analogy, because that's really the role they fill is to backfill and help absorb.
Yeah, because they're never going to be that initial attack or any of that stuff. They're gonna get to you in that hour 12 to hour 24 of the incident, and it's just the nature of what it is. I mean, they have to either call people in and get trucks filled, and or they already have it assigned. They have to go get the truck. Most of the TIFMAS crews are paid firefighters that are coming out of a major department somewhere. They're not, even though they have tons of training and they're getting that wildland training, most of them outside of that role of TIFMAS have never been on the back of a brush truck. That's just not what they got trained to do. They don't understand it. They don't know what you're doing.
And for a lot of people that aren't familiar with particularly Texas wildland firefighting, and it is a kind of a regional thing, but it really is statewide. We don't really do ground pounding in our area. Our concept of a brush truck and even a wildland fire engine, there's not ground pounding there. The engine goes to the house, protects the structure, but the crews are actually riding in the back of pickup trucks filled with various size water tanks and foam cells, and they'll work in tandem or even as a little strike force, but they'll also work with dozer operators, plow operators. It's not something very familiar to like California, Colorado, Oregon, Washington. We don't. The fires that we have, particularly in our area, but even most of the state, these aren't redwoods. These aren't pine trees. These aren't sequoias. These aren't Douglas firs. It's the mysterious mesquite and the ever exotic cedar tree. And the damn thing's 20 feet tall.
At the tallest.
Yeah, and it's made of nothing but napalm and thermite. And a cedar fire is exceedingly violent, exceedingly hot, and it's not like a Pacific like crown fire or Colorado crown fire, where fire's running in the treetops. No, that doesn't happen here. Maybe in East Texas.
Yeah, and I have no idea. I've never really been out that way. Most of my world revolved around West Texas, where the average tree is 6 feet tall, and you can see over it and dead. So but a lot of open grassland that we have, and that's like you can't walk fast enough to keep up with the fire. It moves faster than what a human can walk or run, so you can't keep up with it. So in that open grassland where it's just, the fire can move 30, 40 miles an hour. Like, the only way you can keep up with it is on a truck. That's the only way you're going to get to it. And I would think Oklahoma would have some of that same, and there's probably parts of Colorado. And,
Eastern Colorado would be that way. It's all prairies.
But, it's kind of unique. Texas is a really big place, and there's a lot of different geography, and I'm sure what the guys in the Davis Mountains do is different from what the guys at, Corpus Christi do is different from what we do.
Versus Amarillo versus Lufkin.
Yeah, for sure. But in general, our world, it's ride the back of the truck and spray water from there and fight the fire and occasionally get off and drag a red line or
just drive up to it and squirt it. If you have to drive through it, drive through it.
Yeah. Sometimes you get your Polish stick and your Highlander rake, but that's a rare occurrence generally for us. That's just not how we do it.
And by rare, he means it never happens.
Yeah, and nobody here knows what an Indian pack is. That's a different thing altogether. So
yeah. So for anyone that we do happen to have that's not listening locally, yeah, our local tactics, for North and Central Texas, it's our wildland firefighting is literally done from the back of a truck. Yeah, there's no way we could do ground pounding. Also, one thing I'm going to add to this, you know, guys down in Australia, they get heat, but I realize everyone has a different version of hot. You are more than welcome to come to Texas in June when it's 120 degrees and 30 or 40% humidity and sit there and walk along that brush truck while I'm driving.
yeah, or it's 117 and 2% humidity.
Yeah.
Because that happens too. You know, and we get criticized, and for those of you that are not from this part of Texas, we get criticized for, you guys, that's so dangerous. But I'm not a senior fellow in a research institute, but I've dabbled in trying to look at how many firefighters get killed that were riding on the back of a brush truck versus how many get killed that were with their chainsaw and their rake. And from what I can tell, there's a lot less of us getting hurt on the back of a brush truck.
Yeah, well, in them brush trucks, I do know, I don't know if it's nationwide in Australia, but I'd stumbled across an article on Australian brush trucks. And I don't know if the department made it a requirement. I don't know if it's like a national requirement, but they have because, the physical distances that they're covering to even be able to get to a fire. The physical distance that they're having to get to these places, they have a built-in safety system in these rigs where they cannot consume the last 20% of the water. And that water's literally connected to I'm going to call it a sprinkler. It's more of like a fire sprinkler head. If you deploy the system, it throws a curtain of water around the people on the truck and the apparatus. And our brush trucks operate not on that same concept, but we have the same policies. You never use all the water on the apparatus. The truck is an island of refuge and safety in the event something happens. I realize that if you're in a bad wildland fire, the last place you want to be sitting in the cab of a pickup, but I can assure you that's 14 times better than trying to outrun it, because you're not.
Yeah, especially if it's running pretty fast, it'll be past you in
Seconds.
And I've been on the fires. I'm working on a fire that had 3 firefighters burned. It was a major news story. And their truck died, the engine died, their pump died. Like, there was some mechanical failures there. The thought was that it was because of the smoke choked out the engine, but I think ultimately what it was a failure of the battery and the alternator on the truck, and so that it was an electrical problem that caused the truck to die. When it was all said and done, the truck didn't burn up. The truck was saved. That was fixed and hauled off and made better. But they got themselves in a pickle when that truck died, and they couldn't defend themselves, and they did get burned over. It's a horrible thing, but that's a very rare occurrence.
Yeah, I mean, just since I've been doing this, the wildland firefighter deaths that I know of are not guys that are riding in the back of the trucks.
Yeah, and if they are, it's because they got hit on the highway or
right. Yeah, they're traffic accidents.
Yeah, and a lot of that is the traffic accident side of it, where the guys riding in the back of the truck. If they were in the cab of the truck, the outcome potentially could have been the same. But the failure of that is the failure to control the roadway.
Right. Yeah, and just frankly stupidity, driving way too fast for the conditions present.
Yeah.
And I hate to be callous there, but that's what it is. And I've seen some guys do their absolute best impersonation of Wile E. Coyote on a rocket going across fields, and that usually results in the guy in the back of the truck damn near beating the other person to death because they don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
So,
Or the good way to fix it, you just stick the nozzle in the window and turn it on.
well,
That
that'll get
that
their attention.
that tends to stop the situation immediately. It escalates into a fist fight, but at least you're not moving anymore.
Right. And for you guys that are avid ground pounders, more power to you. I have nothing wrong. That's how you guys operate. It works for you. That's awesome. This is what we're going to do. I don't like walking.
I can't see any reason in my mind why it's not. I mean, I know NFPA disagrees with it. I know the Forest Service disagrees with it. And I know all these people disagree with it. But I've yet to see an argument from them that is provable by the data that's out there.
The argument, and you've already stated it, the argument's going to be just the vehicle moving and injuries that occur from the vehicle moving.
Yeah.
I won't dispute that. Like I said, slow down. That's how you prevent that. What else?
I don't know. I think we've done pretty good on this topic, and we're about an hour in, a little less.
Okay.
We can certainly go on forever about some of this stuff, and that's what prompted us to have a podcast, because we can bloviate with the best of them.
Yeah, it may come as a surprise, but literally there's no preparation for this. We just sat down and literally winged it. And I can assure you, between the two of us, this could be a 19-hour podcast today if we wanted it to be. We do appreciate everyone that is listening. And any thoughts, concerns, comments, just fire them away at us. Like I said, I'm wrong. I just, period.
Yeah.
Everything I say is wrong. Don't ever say anything, well, I heard this guy say this. Nope. I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I'm not wrong, give me a minute and I'll prove I'm wrong.
Outside of that, guys, thank you for listening. This is Matt.
This is Jesse.
And we'll be out for It Tastes Like Burning.